Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today, we are beginning our discussion of The Fade Out, Volume 1, Issues 1 through 4, by Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, and Betsy Breitweiser. Betsy? Is that what she... I can't... Betty.
Betty. I think, yeah.
Elizabeth is what she's published as.
Officially Elizabeth, but I've heard her referred to as Betty. I think that's probably how she introduces herself to people that know her. But yeah, we're turning back into the world of Brubaker and Phillips. Just a rad book. I really love this book, and I think
so can I say
sure.
I had questions about whether there was anything to discuss with this book. Like, that was my only thing, was like, is it really a rereadable book? Mm-hmm. And already just from volume 1, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff here that, like, you know me, I'm a small cast type book reader. Like, I prefer 2 or 3 characters. This one's a lot for me in that sense. But I trust Brubaker, so I'm hanging with it.
It's a large cast, but it's a large cast of, it's not a large main cast. It's a large cast. There's probably 15
There's a
people.
lot of similar looking dudes. That's not a knock at Sean Phillips.
It's a little, it's a little bit of Sean Phillips. Also, you're talking about a very specific era.
It's a homogeneity of the cast problem, not a Sean Phillips problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the cast also should not have looked differently.
Yeah. There's also very
that's
specifically,
just is what it is.
There's also very specifically, one of our characters, Maya, her title is the replacement blonde. So, like, the whole point is she's supposed to look like the girl who dies, so it's meant to evoke the same thing. But yes, there is a sense of homogeneity to it. I mean, you have one black character, which, again, very specific. There's a reason for that. But I think what's interesting about this, and I think it's worth noting, in that they didn't, these arcs don't have names specifically, but the trades are very specifically labeled Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, which I think has multiple meanings there. The idea that this is a Hollywood story, so you're thinking about it in a 3-act structure, but they're also presenting the story in a 3-act structure. So if you think about that going into it, and especially what you find out, you go in right away and you understand that it's a murder mystery, right? You have this up and coming actress, Valeria Summers, star of this film. She dies, and the whole point of the story is to figure out, like, the who, the how, the why, the what, all that stuff there. So if you think about this murder mystery and you already have it in your mind that you have this 3-act structure, you can kind of parcel out where you think the story might go. You can, you can kind of start if you just have a sense of the what that narrative structure should be, that 3-act structure. And so in this first arc, I think they play that perfectly to a T, because you get to the end of these first 4 issues and, like, you don't have any answers, and I think Brubaker and Phillips do an incredible job setting up the story of our main character, Charlie Parrish, the fact that he was there when this murder happened, but, like, clearly he has no memory of it. And we're going back through and he's trying to place, I saw this person that night, but, like, when did this happen? And they're throwing out all these, for lack of a better word, suspects, although no one's really a suspect at this point, right? Like, no one's been like, no one's
everyone's
had a finger
suspicious, but there's no suspect. Yeah.
That's a better way to put it. Yeah, because no one's had a finger pointed at them, be like, you did this. Suspicious. But all this stuff kind of gets thrown into the pot, and because of how they wrote Charlie and everything about his situation, you understand that he's an unreliable narrator. You understand that what you're seeing, what his recollections are, you immediately don't trust it. So you have no idea at this point, like, any of the circumstance leading up to it. And I think in terms of, like, a whodunit, in terms of the murder mystery aspect of it, I think this first arc sets you up just like ideally to be like, well, now I got to see what happens next. If this is your first season of your 3-season TV show, you get to the end of end of the first season, you're like, well, God, when does season 2 start? Exactly. I got to get into it. What happens next here? There is a forward momentum to the story that just propels you and keeps you going, without a lot of action. You know, this isn't an action heavy book. This isn't like the previous book we covered with Brubaker and Phillips, Kill or Be Killed, or a story about a vigilante who may or may not be haunted by some demon that propels actions. Like there are action scenes in there. You know, this guy's like got a ski mask on and a sawed-off shotgun. He's like kicking down doors and, you know, taking out drug dealers and pimps and things like that. There's not a lot of action in this book, but the story, the narrative propels you forward.
Yeah. Well, let me say the other thing that was very eye-opening here, because when I first read this, I was reading the trades in a post-Me Too world.
Sure.
Me Too movement broke October 2017.
Mhm.
I stupidly thought this was a reaction to that. This is
Oh,
3 years before that,
Yeah.
which means Brubaker is calling out the behavior of studio heads. Now he
Yeah.
said it, you know, in a different era, perhaps to say like, "Oh, I'm not, commenting on Harvey Weinstein or anyone right now." He's like, "Oh, don't come after me."
Yeah.
But this is what it was. Nothing changed. You do the math.
Exactly. It was. There is something to that of this is how it's always been, but weirdly, there was no, not going to use that word. Back then, it was just more overt and accepted. You know,
right? Even in the story, there are people kind of like wincing and looking away.
Yeah.
But it was like, well, there's nothing I can do about it.
It was versus where we were in our modern day when we were under the illusion that things had changed, and maybe we had convinced ourselves that things had changed, but it really hadn't, and that pushed it down into the shadows, which in some ways makes it worse, right?
Right.
It's like, if I'm going to be confronted, like personally, if I'm going to be confronted with discrimination or bigotry or something like that in my personal life, like I'd much rather have someone say it to my face and understand, okay, I know where you stand. I don't have to agree with you, but like you're being frank about it, versus the person that's like hiding their racism because they know, because like, why are you hiding it? That's like a tacit understanding that you know this is wrong. So why are you doing it? You know, if this is acceptable behavior, if this is something you think is okay, why are you being secretive about it? And so there is something about back in the day when it was just like, this is how it was. How it was terrible, right? Don't get me wrong. How it was terrible, but it was at least on some level above board, at least for those actions here. And I think what we're seeing, what they've started off, what Brubaker has to start off in the story is, all that stuff that's above that's above the table that you see, that's all terrible. There's still some kind of seedy underbelly going on. There's still another layer below that. So yeah, I don't think they were not attempting to comment on current day Hollywood or society. It's just that society, this wasn't life imitating as art imitating life. It was art being art, and then life being like, oh yeah, by the way, nothing's changed, you know?
Yeah.
This is how it always is, life didn't change to meet art. It was just, no, life never changed. This is how it always was. And so you can write a story about 1940s Hollywood, and there are so many themes and ideas that are still resonant because they're still relevant, in terms of like the studio politics and things like that.
Now, do you like not to get too off track here, but the head of the studio to me looks a little like Harvey Weinstein. And had they written this book about modern Hollywood, do you think, I mean, I guess with comics, it's like such a relatively small audience, like no one was probably going to litigate them, but there's also something about like my memory of this book is I don't remember who did it or really even why. I just remember vibes. And for the record, totally still delivers on vibes. But now I'm really catching a lot of the story beats, the character beats.
Yeah.
And what you start off thinking are your two protagonists, Charlie and Gil. And I think that remains broadly true. for the series?
Yes. I mean, Charlie
Charlie for
definitely,
sure.
yeah, Charlie is our main character. He is our POV character, essentially.
But the Charlie Gill relationship is so much more fascinating to me than I remembered.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You
Well,
know,
I
that
think
Gill was blacklisted,
yeah,
and to give Charlie a leg up, he was like,
yeah,
"You should be the one to turn me in,
yeah,
but then I'll do all the writing for you
yeah.
because you've
You
got all
can't
this
write anymore.
PTSD."
Yeah, because you, yeah,
Which,
yeah,
and I think that's the other interesting thing is that they're kind of explaining like this generation of men acted horribly, not excusing it, but an explanatory factor is all of the post-war trauma
hmm
that a lot of these guys had. Again,
yeah,
like they had trauma from the war does not justify groping and molesting women for
yeah,
decades.
yeah. Well,
Obviously.
and we don't see Charlie doing that, but we do see. But there's an explanation a little bit as to like Gil. Obviously, well, I was gonna say Gil is a functional alcoholic, but really he's not. He's just an alcoholic. But the just what that generation, you're right, what that generation of people and what those men went through at the time, and especially coming out of the post-war, having HUAC there and everything that goes on with the Red Scare and all that. And yeah, you're right. They're not condoning actions or justifying them, but they're putting them that they're saying this is what it was here. I think they're trying to show facets of people that would have existed and what they would have gone through and how that might have affected them. And I agree. I think the kind of the bait and switch of the Charlie and Gil relationship, right? It starts off a bit of a feint where you're like, oh, yeah, Charlie, named names and Gil was black. Like after the Hollywood 10, he was on like the next wave. He was named, but then you find out that Charlie named them. Then you find out it was a ruse. The two of them cooked up together, and then you find out that Gil. It was a ruse because Gil then was going to be like the shadow writer, the ghost writer of the stuff that Charlie did, and you find out because Charlie can't write because he was in the war. Why was he in the war? Well, he was there because Clark Gable asked him to go to make movies out there, and by being there he saw actual war, and that screwed him up. So like it's this slow peeling back of Charlie's character where you kind of see where he ends up and what his situation is. And I don't know, I feel bad for the guy. Just feel like, wow, this guy is like he's hanging on, he's trying, but like dude just needs some therapy, but that like wasn't an option back then.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
No, being the age I am, I know dudes who were alive or I knew dudes who were alive back
yeah,
then.
yeah,
And like, you know, if I were to suggest to my grandparents who have been dead at least more than a decade now, but if I had ever suggested to them at any point that they get therapy,
yeah,
they would look at me and like even my parents who were like 70-ish, um, they know like they will suggest therapy to like one of us if something's wrong, but would
Mm.
never
Never
consider
consider,
going
yeah, yeah,
themselves.
never
Um,
consider, yeah.
because I think one flew over the cuckoo's nest really did some damage.
Well, yeah,
Um,
yeah, it was looked at differently, and I, there is it, just the idea that Charlie can't even admit clear to anyone that he's suffering, the idea that he can't even say it out loud because one, I don't think he's like emotionally capable of doing it, but also like he fears for his job or his livelihood, right? If he
right.
tells them like I'm suffering from this, like he's not gonna get a writing job. Clearly, it was hard enough for him to get a writing job in general. For him to do what he was doing prior to the war. He's already in a rough place, and then you add on um, the PTSD he has from World War II, and yeah, he's just even in a worse place. He's the kind of character you see in it is the kind of character that Brubaker and Phillips generally like, which is like this guy ain't the hero, you know. And even
Right.
in their books where they've written guys who are heroes, like Reckless, I think is a book where Ethan Reckless is like the most heroic character because he's like genuinely a good person, but like the dude doesn't have any money. but yet he owns this like old school theater that he like lives in, but he lives out of a van. But like the characters that they write are these people who are down in their luck. Criminal is a story about people involved in organized crime, but it's not about the crime bosses. It's not even about like the capos who are like it's about the guys doing the grunt work. It's the
Right.
guys the lowest, the bottom of the totem pole. Those are the guys, the characters that they focus on and explore. And someone like Charlie is in that mold of this guy's just trying to get by any way he can. Like he's holding on by a thread, and that thread is dwindling rapidly as he's trying to scramble and stay above water. Which I think, it's one thing I think I like about their stories so much. Why I gravitate towards them is because it's like these characters are all messed up. There's something about that there's something about the characters just being like, Charlie's not the most likable guy, right? Like they're
Oh
not.
no, I mean, well,
They're
clearly
not.
he
They're
doesn't
not
even like
worried.
himself. Like he's not even
Yeah,
rooting for himself, really.
yeah.
Like he's trying to stay
They're
alive, but that's about
yeah.
it.
Brubaker and Phillips aren't concerned about like, you got to connect with this character because you got to like him. Like they're never going to do the save the cat moment, right? They're never
Right.
going to do the thing where, oh, the cat does that. That means good person, we're in with that. They're never going to have that. They're not worried about that sort of character connection. They're just like, here's the world, here's the people, they all suck, go. And like that's the world that they exist in for kind of across all of their work, which I think is super, super interesting. And again, I think Charlie Parrish is a character that fits right in with that. He just happens in this case to be a Hollywood screenwriter, or by trade. Whether or not he's actually doing that job is debatable, but that's what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Um. Wow. Like we dove like straight into the deep end.
Mhm.
Um. I will say the cast of characters at the beginning is very
Yeah,
helpful to me. Like I
I
flipped
love
back to
that.
it a few times. Like
Yeah,
it seems like just a cool you know insert like for fun, but it is actually helpful when there are a bunch of white guys with slicked back hair.
yeah. Well,
Um,
they've all got slick back hair or like crew cuts or close shaves and all that. But yeah, no, I thought about it this time too. It's almost like it's kind of like a playbill, right? You
exactly.
get it a show. Here's the cast. We're going to put it out there, and you're going to so you can always jump back and have an idea of who everyone is and kind of what's going on with it. So yeah, you can flip back, and if you've maybe confused uh, Victor Thursby, who's the co-founder of the studio, with the Franz Schmidt character, who is the director, the German director. These guys all kind of look the same here. You've got your talent agent, you've got your various actors. It's helpful there as a reference to just go back and be like, wait, who is this person one more time? Just
Right.
you're right. It is both function but I also think there's an intentional mirroring of kind of what they're presenting of. It says cast of characters, so this is in our story, in our play here. Here's who you have to pay attention to. Here's who everyone is. And you get that up front before you even get to the story. So they're telling you who these people are going to be, which is great because you flip through it, and the last one is Clark Gable. You're like, wait, Clark Gable?
Yeah.
Like Clark Gable? Like, it's really, he's a character in this, and it's just another way for them to ground this
And if you
story.
weren't sure, look at the
Yeah.
quote beneath
Well,
him.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. This
Like,
isn't
oh, it's that Clark Gable. Yeah.
exactly, but
Franklin, my
I
dear.
yeah, yeah. I love that they put that out there. If you have nothing about this story, but they throw that in there and they drop it in the last one. You're like, wait a minute, really? But again, it grounds you in this idea of like, this is a story that could have plausibly taken place at that time. And they name check other real things, other real studios like RKO and things like that. So they reference there's a reference in here post-war, which I think lines up. It should line up with actual Hollywood history, which was the dissolution of the old studio system. The way Hollywood used to
Oh
run back
yeah.
in the day, where actors and stars were contracted to studios and they just only did work for those studios. That effectively amounted to like indentured servitude. But that going away and people being able to make actors having freedom to work and to whatever studios, whatever directors, things like that. Thursby like lamenting that fact because that meant the studios lost power. But that was obviously a big shift in the way movies were made and a big moment in Hollywood history. So them referencing that and that also being kind of a turning point in terms of where this studio, which is the Victory Street Pictures, this fictional studio, it's kind of where they stand in the firmament of Hollywood and studios at the time, grounding it in real events in the real timeline and having those things have an effect on the story. Yeah, it places it just further places this like in a time and place and a setting that people either are familiar with or can get familiar with.
Right.
Because if you don't know much about this time period in Hollywood and it interests you, you can go back and read about this and you can start connecting dots and see where this could have lined up. And oh, this is that event here. That's this picture here. This actor, this actress, yada yada yada. That's this location here. Things like that. They're all going to match up because that's just how Brubaker and Phillips roll. They're not going to set a story in post-war Hollywood and not have it connect. It's not going to be a true alt timeline Hollywood, right? It's going to be our version, and this is a story that could have existed in that time.
Yeah. The story itself is fundamentally a mystery, right? Like, because as I was reading it, I was like, there is this little like lapse of memory mystery, but then you almost get so in the mire of like the studio's desperation to like just crap out another movie, like replace the blonde, yada yada yada, that
like
you kind of forget about the mystery until the camera at the end of Act One, and then you're like, right, we're reading a mystery. Like I know that. So I think that one caught me off guard a little bit. What I really loved about the like, grinding out the movie, like it's over budget, it's not going to make money, it's not going to be good, just finish the damn thing, get it out, and move on to the next one, is the painful reality of that. Because I personally find bad movies so fascinating. Like I really do, because I'm like somewhere like the pitch for this was good enough that someone thought they could throw hundreds of millions of dollars at it and make money. And a director, oftentimes a big name director, picked up the script, saw the budget, said, yeah, we can make this work. The actors signed on. Like very few people thought, I'm making a really bad movie. And then I've heard from a lot of actors' interviews, actors and directors who have said like, you're like halfway through, a 20-week shoot and you're just like, we have nothing. Like, this is terrible, but we just have to finish it and put the best thing for it. Like a lot of people worked really, really hard and it's not going to matter because this is going to be bad. And
I think the key there is that, the key you said
really
there is that
for him.
Almost no production starts with the idea that this is going to be bad,
Yeah, unless it's like an expendable sequel.
But even those, you have an idea. If you're making that, you're like, what this story is going to be a lot of good action scenes. Like that's what this movie is.
Yeah.
You're definitely right. So by the end, when things are wrapping up, you have an idea if this is going to be good or not, but you don't start out that way being like, yeah, this is crap. This is not going to work. Enough people have to say yes to something for it to have had some merit on some level to someone, but yeah, that idea of, and I think especially back then in Hollywood, it was just, we only have X amount of days for shooting because as soon as this is done, we got to strike these sets and do the next one because the next one's coming up. And so the idea that this machine's got to keep going. Our leading lady died. Well, just find another one. pick back up and let's go, and we'll figure out a way to reshoot the earlier scenes. It's kind of like what are we doing? But yet that's what it was, and that is one way. It's probably not still, but it's definitely how it was back then.
Right.
No rest for the weary. Just keep going.
So my tangential question, and Brubaker's body of work better than I do, was there an attempt before 2014 to try to like adapt one of his comics that went poorly?
You mean like
Like, did someone purchase IP for one of his books and he was kind of in the movie production and realized this is gonna suck? Like for instance, Catwoman. Like his run had come out, then the Halle Berry movie.
Yeah.
Did they consult him on that? And then he saw the movie and was like, "Oh God!" I didn't know it could go this bad.
At this point, when he would have been writing this, because this would have been probably,
I guess he would have been writing in 2013.
20, well, like probably the idea was run up. This book coming out in 2014. The back half of 2014. Probably writing it 2012, 2013, something like that. I don't think so. Because around this time or a little after, I think, was Velvet, and Velvet got optioned very early, and that didn't, I think Velvet was after this, or around the same time. That was optioned very early and didn't kind of go anywhere with it. What I will say is, his stuff specifically at that point, I don't think had been, like, his creator-owned stuff specifically had not been really tapped to be adapted yet. But he had worked and has worked a lot in Hollywood. But if you want to see, so I think what I'm guessing, if your question is leading to is, do you think, if you're asking if you think
there was
any personal experience went into this?
Yeah, of like,
what I would say,
I'm in the production process of this thing and it sucks.
What I would say is, in the fade out, no. If you want to read what Ed Brubaker's experience is in Hollywood and has been, you're going to want to pick up The Knives, which is the most recent criminal OGN that came out last year in 2025. In the criminal universe, he has a character who has written it's a comic strip, a daily comic strip, and part of his story is, they're going to adapt that into either a TV or a series or a movie, and he gets brought on as the creator and all that stuff. And that part of the story and the frustration that character goes through and what he's dealt with, what he deals with, you can clearly be like, oh, I bet Brubaker had that exact same conversation with the studio exec. Oh, I bet he had that exact conversation with the producer. So if you want to see a 1-to-1, pick up The Knives.
That's a good recommendation.
I don't think it plays in as much here. I think this is just this I think is just growing up in Southern California, probably being around and being adjacent to this time, and probably having a fascination with it and interest with it. But yeah, I don't think this one has as much personal Hollywood experience. The Knives has probably too much personal experience. It's still very good, but it's also very on the nose.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm looking at his IMDb, and most of his writing credits are superhero stuff.
Yeah,
and he's not really getting like standalone writing credits until after this, like Winter Soldier type stuff. Yeah, but
Winter Soldier is credited by. I mean, like he and he's in the writers' room for a lot of stuff. And more so within the last 10 years since the Fade Out has come out, where he's worked more directly as a
he
creative.
And this is obviously after the Fade Out, but I see he has a created by credit for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Well, because he created Winter Soldier. That's why.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so okay.
That's what. Yeah, he didn't write that, but he has a story credit, a character credit there. He did a series with Nicholas Winding Refn, Too Old to Die Young, or was that Rucka? I
think that is Rucka, but
he has worked. I think it was Rucka too. He has worked more from a larger creative sense, I think in the past like 10-ish years since this book has come out. But he has spent time in Hollywood, in writers' rooms, things like that. And yeah, a lot of it's genre stuff, a lot of it's crime focused stuff, and a lot of it's superhero stuff because that's what his comics are about. But yeah, his this book I don't think is influenced as much in some of that because it's so specific, right? The idea of it coming post-war, the influence of HUAC and all that stuff, like it's so very specific to the time period. I don't think it's too hard to get if you're familiar with that time period in Hollywood. I don't think it's too hard for a writer to get into the headspace of a character like Charlie with without needing the experience because it was so specific to that time and place of where the studios were at, how Hollywood existed, and how it operated versus how it operates now with specific regard to adapting IP and things of that nature.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, that's a big enough tangent.
Yeah.
But I like couldn't help but start wondering like, oh yeah, his name
definitely,
is appearing more and more in stuff, and I was wondering if he had a bad first experience. It's like it reminded me of that scene in The West Wing where Josh Lyman says something like, I feel as useless as a writer on a movie set. And in the West Wing Weekly podcast, they were like, this was clearly Sorkin like dumping his frustration about the American president or A Few Good Men or something, because that is something the character of Josh Lyman would know nothing about.
Yeah.
And like, there's no reason that character would make that reference. So it's almost a little fourth wall breaking. Great line.
But very much a self-insert, 100%.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was wondering if there's any of that in here. Not to say that it was like would have been only about that, but if there was just a little inside track.
Yeah.
I love spotting insider baseball. Like whenever I can find it,
One thing I don't know if I ever really picked up on this. It's something I noticed this time. It stuck out to me. Not that I don't think it changes any way I think about the story, but I thought it was interesting that the narration boxes are done in third person.
Yeah, I wondered who was doing that, and I especially love when it interrupts the caption bubble when Charlie's not paying attention. Yeah, and the caption box overlays. You're like, wait, why can't I read that? And then you read the caption box, and it's like, but Charlie wasn't really listening. And it's like, that's good. That's great lettering.
But it is an interesting. I think it's an interesting writing choice. This idea of, we are in Charlie's head because we get his thoughts, but it is written as if, like. It's written like scene direction. It's written like a script. It's written from a third person observer. So yeah, you're right to question who is right, who is telling this story, and does it ultimately matter? Is that simply a choice made in presentation? And I think that's what it is. That they didn't want this to be in. Charlie's not saying I did this. Why can't I remember? Blah blah. It's he couldn't remember. He was struggling. And so it's like you are getting the asides, you're getting the notes, you're getting the stage direction from a script or something like that. You're getting this detached third person viewer of narrating the story to you as you're reading it and viewing it on the page, which again, I think that's a really interesting choice. And so I don't know if I ever clocked that specifically when I've gone back and read this book reread this book in the time since I first read it, but it really jumped out at me because I guess maybe I was paying attention to it. This idea of someone is telling you the reader, the story, and it's never addressed, and it isn't meant to be like a recollection or something like that, or a third person or viewer. It's just an interesting story presentation choice, which I really like because it gives this story a different sort of flavor. The idea that you aren't in Charlie's POV, and it allows the story to leave his POV, right? Even though he is our main character, there are plenty of scenes where he's not present at all,
right?
And the narration,
I think there's a whole issue. Issue 3, I don't think you really get any Charlie.
Pretty much, yeah.
Nothing substantive.
Yeah, issue 3, I think, is basically the Maya story, right? That's
Yes.
when she comes in.
It's the
So
Maya
yeah.
story and the backstory for the head of the studio, his 1928,
Oh yeah, yeah. His
adventure up in the woods.
up in the yeah. But yeah, so but you get the same. You aren't getting Charlie's thoughts about what we're seeing on the page in the third person. You're getting the people we see in the scene. So you can get anyone's thoughts, as our studio head Victor is, kind of going through when he's saying he was thinking this, he thought about this, he remembered that. That is his perspective, the character we're seeing right then and there. So this idea that the narration can shift depending on whose point of view we're in, but we're never actually in somebody's head. No one is self-narrating. And I like that idea. I think it's a cool choice for this story.
Yeah. Amazingly, again, we're not let's say this is at the back end of an episode. We're not a recap podcast. That's actually the end of my notes. I don't have a lot else other than to say, as always, like it goes without saying, I love the art. It's just perfect
It's
for the
gorgeous.
vibe.
Yeah.
He does faces and reaction shots so well.
Mhm.
In fact, there's that one early on in issue one that I was wondering, like, is that actually harder to draw than a regular face where Charlie is trying to remember the events of the night before and they're blank faces?
Oh yeah. Like the dream or whatever it
Yeah,
is. Yeah, the
where it's
hallucination.
like, I remember there were two guys standing there. They're just blank white faces. And I was like,
Yeah.
I guess it couldn't possibly be harder, than all the detail and stuff that goes into the face, but
Yeah.
to draw that just right to convey the
Yeah.
idea.
I think.
With very few words. Like this is not
Oh yeah.
Brubaker is not a wordy guy unnecessarily, and
Yeah. There
a
there isn't a
lot
lot
of
of.
trust in the art.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I mean, this is at this point. This is the two of them kind of finding their groove. Or having already found their groove. They've done enough together where I think they understand what each other's strengths are, and Brubaker knows how to write specifically for Sean Phillips. And this is at a point where Brubaker is now almost exclusively writing just for him. You know, one thing I think I really like about this book, and it's something that, regardless of who is coloring Sean Phillips, whether it was, like Elizabeth Breitweiser now or his son Sean Phillips as is currently, they do a lot of great work with shadow. Whether it's cast across someone's face or their body, part of a room, they use black and darkness really, really well. And I think this book, it fits well. In general, it fits with the pair's like noir storytelling aesthetic in general
Right.
across all their stories. There's always this noir setting. So this idea that everything is dark and shadowed and a little obscure. I think they do some really good stuff with shadows, especially like across faces, where you're not seeing half or three quarters of a character's face, and it could be like a character in the foreground, but there's light on the back. So maybe you see Charlie's face in the background or something like that. But to manipulate the color in the panel that way, to not be afraid of having really dark spots, things where less detail is there, to not be afraid of that and understand that there's usefulness to it, and that not everything has to be crystal clear, not everything has to be just like super hyper defined. Even though Sean Phillips's style, while not, I think we said this in the Kill or Be Killed season, it's not photorealistic the way he draws, but it's not cartoony either, right?
Right.
There is he's not trying to do like an Alex Ross level, like super photorealistic, but he's not drawing. He doesn't have like a more abstract style like a Junie Ba or something like that, where the intent of the way the characters are drawn is meant to be, or like a Daniel Warren Johnson that we talked about recently, right? Where there is a exaggeratedness that is intentional. He's drawing real people in real situations, but there is still
I
there's
would
enough
describe it as
complexity.
like I the well, I don't know. Maybe this is a derogatory term to use on this medium. I would describe it as like a filmic quality, like something shot on film versus shot digitally. Because
Yeah, yeah.
like film has certain grain and texture to it.
Hmm.
Um, analog equipment has certain limitations, certain foci,
Yeah.
certain distortions of things. And sometimes good directors knew how to use those things to create what they wanted. And if you shoot something on a digital device with a digital camera and everything else, it's just showing you exactly what's there, exactly how it is.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's actually harder to tell a story that way, without a point of view from the visual perspective.
I definitely agree when it comes to film that way. I think texture is a good the way that Sean Phillips does draw and the way he works with his colorist, no matter who it is, there is a texture. There is kind of a graininess to it. And I think they do that with some of the muted colors when they use pops of color and things like that are very specific. Again, when things so much of this takes place in nighttime or dark time or dusk or whatnot.
So much gorgeous shadow work, like
Yeah,
unreal shadow work.
It's so good. But yeah, there is a sense of and I think depth of focus. It's something that you maybe just talked about when you said about film versus digital, right? The idea of like digital being potentially like infinite focus, where
Right.
you can see everything versus um, having things in the foreground and things in the background. I think something that Sean Phillips does very well is when he shoots, when there is a background there, it looks like it's in the background. The things that are detailed, you can notice it, but it is less distinct. That there is a depth of field there that he's trying to show in the way that he presents his panels and the way he frames his characters. And yeah, it's just it's God, it's so good. It's so good. I think again, I think this is the book. I think I said that this is the book where I understood that Brubaker and Phillips were a creative team pair. So this is the book where I went in knowing that, oh, these two guys are a thing and they work together and they work in this certain way. And I can now recognize this person's art. That's a big thing for me when I get into a creator, especially an artist. When I can know for a fact, I can picture their style and I can recognize it and see, oh, this is this person's art. This is this person's art. This is Sean Phillips's art. And I go into a book knowing who they are, knowing not so much what to expect, but just having an understanding of what their style is and presentation is. And that makes me excited for the book outside of what the book's about, like independent of that. But just having the foreknowledge of these two guys are working together on a book now. I recognize them. I'm going to go read it. For me, this was the start of that. Again, it wasn't the first Brubaker and Phillips book that I read, but it being the first one of me being aware of them as a creative pair, this was the one I went into it knowing I'm going to read everything these guys do. This is when I signed up for the lifetime pass of these guys. Going into this book was when I knew these guys are my guys and I'm going to read everything that they do. And to get a story like this, again, I think I said this last week. If Brubaker and Phillips had never done a story about this era of Hollywood, they would get hounded every time they appeared somewhere of someone asking, hey, why haven't you guys done a story about 1940s Hollywood? Like, this is the story that fits their vibe and aesthetic and their feel so well. And so for this one, for me to be that first book of like, yes, I'm now in for these guys and, oh, they got a new book out and, oh, it's this and it rules. Yeah, I'm super happy every time I go back to that because I can put myself back in the headspace of being like, yes, like I found these guys and these guys are going to be my guys. And to get a book like this that is so, again, it draws you in with this mystery. It's been, and in this first act of the story, like there are no answers, and not out of the no answers, you're barely even scratching the surface of trying to find answers.
Well, I was going to say. The question is still not fully articulated.
Yeah. Well,
other than like who is doing this, like it does now seem to be about Charlie, which
yes,
like when Charlie happened to be there when the actress is killed,
Yeah.
That could have been about the actress.
Yes.
Now someone's house is burned down. He shows up
Yeah.
and here's the click of the camera
The
and the
mysterious
car
guy.
driving
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, this is about Charlie.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
which means that girl was killed because of Charlie, probably.
and like you said, this story after that happens, we're presented with this murder. The bulk narrative part of this story of this first volume is how to move it back on track. It's the aftermath. Yes, it's sad she died. Okay, but how are we going to move this forward? How do we find a replacement actress? So it's about that. No one's even thinking about, was there anything suspicious about this death? Only Charlie thinks that because he saw Val's body and then saw the crime scene photos and is like, that's not what it was, But at the same time, we know that Charlie wasn't all there at the moment. So how much do we trust that? So he thinks it's suspicious, but even then, he hasn't even begun to look into it. So there is a murder mystery here, but you're right. We haven't actually gotten to the mystery part yet. We just know it's going to be a mystery. So far, we only have a presumed murder. Someone died. We actually don't know it's a murder. So it's kind of a spoiler to be like it's a murder mystery, but the idea that there's going to be a mystery, there's something mysterious happening. We don't even get to that here. We're setting up. This is a setup, and that thing is still lingering out there. And they've barely scratched the surface. All they've done is introduce more questions. It's suspicious people. I like that you said that, not suspects, suspicious characters. Everyone's got some sort of ulterior motive. Everyone's playing, multiple degrees chess. And you don't know how it all aligns. And you get to this end, you're like, well, what about what happened in the beginning? Is that still a thing here? How much do these play in? How do these things tie up? And as someone who, again, just already knows and has a sense of who Brubaker and Phillips are, you just know it's going to get there at some point. Things are going to tie up in some way. You may not know how it's going to happen, but you know that when the threads converge, they're going to converge and it's going to be great. Like, I think I can say that confidently. Like, when this thing comes together, when it's revealed, I can remember thinking at the time, being like, I can't wait to get to the end, not because I care about what the answer is, but because I really want to know. I want to see the process, because I know these two guys have a great process ahead of them. It's like, I almost don't care what the quote unquote reveal is, because for me with these guys, I want to see the legwork to get there. I want to see how they lay things out, how they give answers, how they present things. The narrative structure for me, for these guys, is always more important than what the actual story beat ends up being. That's just a byproduct of the cool stuff that comes before it.
Yeah, well, okay, so here's the last distinction I will make for it in this episode, which is it is a noir mystery, but it is not a detective book. Like, there's no sleuth, there's no Benoit Blanc, this is not Maltese Falcon. This is there is no guy in the trench coat and the hat walking around putting together clues, solving anything. Yeah. But there is a mystery, and I think that makes it a little distinct from other things in this era. Like, normally when there's a mystery solver. And Charlie's not actively mystery solving. He's still he's puzzling, he's curious, but he's not sleuthing or sticking his nose into stuff.
And I think where we leave him at the end of this first volume is that he will begin to start sleuthing things, because he's going to because he understands he's now involved, right? So it almost becomes a act of self-preservation, right?
He's not. He's very upset about the girl.
Yeah.
But that was not enough to make him look into this.
Yeah. Because
now that he knows it's not over.
Yeah.
And he can't just find a way to bury himself in alcohol and move on. No, this is still coming for you, whatever this is. Yeah, so you need to maybe figure out what this is and get ahead.
There's another, so he's going to end up being the sleuth, but you're right. He is not that character. He did not come in and be like, I'm going to figure this out. The
mystery itself does not intrigue him enough to dive into the mystery. Self-preservation is what makes him
exactly. Yeah, it's only because he's involved in it. because he was there and obviously has a connection with Val. Like they were clearly friendly. The writer, just being friendly with the actress, maybe the one person that didn't treat her like crap. So there was a personal stake involved, but yeah, up until the end of this arc, that was enough to motivate him. He saw the crime scene photos. He knows like that doesn't jive with what I remember, but that wasn't enough to motivate him. That was enough for him to jump in and be like, "Hey, wait a minute, there's something wrong about this," because then he has to admit he was there. And now all of a sudden that brings a larger problem to the studio. And he's so worried about keeping his job that outweighs whatever the truth is in his mind. It's more important for him to toe the company line because that's how he's staying alive. That's how he's, buying food and has a place to live. But it's when it becomes
he can't really look a gift horse in the mouth
Exactly,
because he is benefiting from the studio for being a writer when he is not in fact writing.
Exactly.
This is a very fragile economy for him.
And he knows that, and that outweighs any pursuit of justice, whatever he might feel of what happened to I think we can call his friend, even though she was a star actress, it's a friend. That part of self-preservation is what motivates him to not look into it. And then it's very clearly they're setting up this idea of, well, he's going to get drawn much further into some much more nastier and seedier stuff. And that sense of self-preservation will still motivate him, but it's a different level of preservation now. That there's clearly some other seedier level, some lower level, more depraved, darker level of this world and part of the story that is starting to bubble up. He's just seen the surface of it. And whether he wants to or not, and I think it's fair to assume that someone like Charlie in his situation is going to be very reluctant to get involved.
Right.
But because it is a story and is a narrative, he's our main character, he will get involved. I think we can say that. But as he gets drawn more and more into this, it's going to become for him that battle of like, I have to keep doing this. Otherwise, there's no other option. Like I can't just like stop now. I'm in too deep, as it were. So now I've got to see this through to whatever end. But I didn't want to be here in the first place. This is not what I wanted to do. This is not what I want to be going. But he's going to get drawn in because these stories are like that, right? These stories are written around this idea of some event has this gravity and it brings people into it. You're right, though. Normally it's a detective. Normally it's someone whose job it is to figure this stuff out. That's the stereotypical crime noir story. We don't have that here, but
which I love those too. Like
I love those too.
To be clear,
goes back to what I said earlier. It goes back to what I said earlier about those aren't the characters that Brubaker and Phillips like to look at. If they would have written something like this with that kind of character, their detective would have been Eddie Valiant.
Yeah.
It would have been the screw up that no one goes to. He would not be the white knight detective who gets pulled into the sea underbelly. He'd be the guy that no one would go to, or maybe someone who's already in the gutter. They're not going to get the person on the high horse.
Well, curiously, the one time they did write ostensibly the white knight detective, curious, willing to like stay in the lines and do everything but hunt someone down, it was the antagonist in Kill or Be Killed.
Yeah.
It was the guy hunting our guy.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, well, normally this would be the hero. And if you started the story, if you told the story in a different order and just started with that character
from her perspective. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. If you started with her perspective, this would be a story about, killing, finding a serial killer.
Yeah.
Instead, it's about like, well, we feel a little empathy for the guy, because he thinks he's going to die and yada, yada, yada. And by the way, I don't know if we've ever established a policy on this, but I'm going to say I don't care about spoilers for books we've already discussed.
You should
years ago. So
because
she doesn't even show up till volume 2 of Kill or Be Killed.
Yeah. Just say, if you're worried about that, stop this, go read Kill or Be Killed, listen to our episodes for that, and then come back and finish this episode. Okay, go.
Great. So to say that, she ultimately wins.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
our protagonist, not hero, but our
Yeah.
protagonist
Our main
takes the
character.
L
Yes.
at the end. Even though they give you the fake out where they can't
Yeah.
resist themselves with,
Yeah.
the superhero tropes
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But um, yeah, it's very interesting that they're clearly drawn to those type of stories, but they're not
Mhm.
doing like a cover band of those type of things.
No, no.
And I compare that to like, you know, Ryan Johnson, who clearly loves like detective mystery things
Oh,
and
yeah.
is
Yeah.
so determined to create original content that he has a character who's self-aware about every Agatha Christie novel and,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of the things is always
Yeah.
citing those things in his stories
Yeah.
just to be like, I'm not ripping it off. This is homage. Like I
Yeah.
love all that stuff,
Yeah.
but this is a slightly different mystery.
Yeah. Well, I think with it's one that's great about that character, that Benoit Blanc character. Yeah, that self awareness of just putting yourself in that. So because it almost it's like it makes you criticism proof in a way. Like
Right.
it's like yeah, I'm I'm saying my character is aware of this stuff. So when they mimic it, I can say it's because they know it, or when I'm actively working against it, it's because I'm trying to comment on it or something like that. Um, but yeah, that kind of character just isn't who Brubaker and Phillips is drawn to. They're going to they're going to find the guy at his lowest point, which, one could plausibly argue that that's what we have here in the fade out. A guy that's got nothing else except what's right in front of him, and then he's going to be forced. He's going to put him in a position where he's forced to follow down a track that he clearly doesn't. He's not going to want to go down, but he has to because it's the only choice he has. He's not doing it out of a sense of morality or justice or anything like that. He's, I'm sure he wants those things, right?
Right.
He would, but doesn't feel like it's his duty to do that. But that's what he's going to end up going down. He's going to end up following. So, yeah, it, it's a nice it's familiar to me, having read all the stuff that Brubaker and Phillips do, to be in this anytime, whatever world they set up in, and just know that I know the sense of what I'm going to get. The vibe is going to be there. And I like sitting in that because they create a world so richly without doing a lot of world building stuff here. And even in this book, like less so, because they tell you what era it's set in, and just with some, conversational knowledge of that time period, I know what the feel is supposed to look, what it's supposed to be. And it's always great to go back to those familiar grounds, because even though it's familiar grounds, they find new ways to put spins on it. They find a new way, a new angle in. And for this one to be the Hollywood writer angle and to throw in all these things specific to the time period, to tell a story that they could tell, like the idea of a starlet being murdered in Hollywood, like you can run that story back over any era of Hollywood, but there's something about that specifically being this era, right? This post-war era of Hollywood that we go back to, whether it's like, again, we cited the Black Dahlia story or LA Confidential, something like that. There's something that we glamorize about this time period, that I don't think affects Brubaker and Phillips in their retelling of it.
Yeah.
Like they're not going back here just because we think it's cool because everyone was so glamorous and suave and debonair. They're going back to it because they think it's interesting, but like not because it's like this was the golden age, the best time, and oh, look at this terrible thing that happened. They're going here because they think it's the most interesting, and it's kind of maybe the most fruitful for them to explore their kind of storytelling, which I think is cool, that they pick the time frame that everyone expects them to, but they don't depict it in the way that everyone else has done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Um, well, that's all that I have for this episode. So if you got any other notes, I'd say empty the tank now. Otherwise, we're on to volume 2 next week.
On to volume 2 next week, man. No, can't wait to keep going on the story.
5 through 8.
Five.
Is it 444? Is it
It's 444. Yeah. So 5
okay.
through 8. Yep. 5 through
Okay.
8. Yep.
You can never be too sure
Yeah, they
always
they,
worth
well, they
checking.
they threw us a curveball with Killer Be Killed.
It was like
Um,
4-5, 4-5 or something. I don't. It
I
was
think one
weird.
of them may have had six in there. I don't know. But yeah, this one, 3 act structure, 4 issues per arc. So yeah, volume 2 at AKA Act 2, issues 5 through 8. Yeah, no, I can't wait to get into it. Keep going, get the middle act. So again, if you're thinking about a 3 act play, a 3 act story, think about what normally happens in that middle act, right? Whether it's Return of the Jedi, Two Towers, something like that. What's that middle part of a trilogy, a part of a story going to be? Keep that in mind going into this next act, and that you're not going to get a lot of answers, but things probably aren't going to get better for our main character, right? This isn't the act where things go
Right.
well typically, and especially not in the Brubaker and Phillips joint.
That's true. All right. Well, if you're reading along, grab volume 2, issues 5 through 8, or just keep flipping in. I didn't even realize I bought this, but I clearly got the complete edition, and I emptied
Oh,
my
nice.
single trades. I got a scratch and dent sale because the top corner is a little bent.
Oh no,
Um,
so terrible. Gosh.
So I know I'm like,
Yeah, no.
and honestly, my graphic novel shelf is packed so tight that I thought it would probably straighten it out.
It probably did a little bit. Yeah, it'd still be a crease there, but yeah, that's a gorgeous edition. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Although, what would you guess based on the cover of this? Like, if you knew nothing about this, that says to me noir action movie.
Oh,
the man
yeah.
with the gun pointed out at you, the
Or
Hollywood land.
it says the man in the gun, the guy in the foreground with the fedora, he's our detective.
Yes,
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
And as I'm
But it's
reading this,
also-
I'm like,
it's
wait,
also
which one
like
is
about-
that?
Yeah. Oh, that's Earl Rath. I think it's supposed to be. That's,
Right.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
like if you pick that up and you start reading immediately in the book, you're like, that's not Charlie. Like
Yeah,
Charlie's the main guy.
Yeah,
Why isn't
yeah.
the main guy? And Charlie definitely looks like a villain on the cover.
Yeah. He's kind of small on the side there. So
I again, my memory is fuzzy on the beats of the plot, so I'm curious what foreshadowing I'm trying to read into the cover they chose for the complete edition,
or just because
or it was just
Also,
a great way to show all the characters.
it's a cool way to look like a vintage movie poster from back in the day. So, but yeah, that's a gorgeous edition. So yeah, if you're reading in one of the collected editions, just read the next 4 issues. They're a nice chapter breaks in there. But yeah, don't go any further here. You want to get to the end of Act 2. So.
Great. We will see you same time next week. Find us storiedarcs.com, Blue Sky Storied Arcs, and Instagram Storied Arcs. See ya.